Hello and welcome to another episode of Cut to Reveal, the podcast where we talk about the editing art form and all the hurdles of that career path. If you've been paying attention, then you know that we have completed season 1. And so we have a couple extra episodes that we wanted to share with you also, including this one. So it's kind of like our gift to you for Christmas, Hanukkah, any holiday that you celebrate in this time of year. So you're welcome. I'm Ricky, as always, and with me is Peter.
Hey everyone. So today we talk to Daysha Broadway, the editor of upcoming film I Wanna Dance with Somebody, about the life of Whitney Houston.
Daysha is an Emmy Award winner. She won an Emmy, a primetime Emmy, for her work on a Black Lady sketch show. And she's also worked on HBO's Insecure. I did not talk with her, but Peter did. And she is a very fun person to talk to, very easy to talk to. And so it really comes through in this interview, which we will show you right now. Yeah. So as it goes, let's roll the tape.
I want to know what made you fall in love with editing.
I think I fell in love with editing just from watching films and being obsessed with films. I was very into Robert Zemeckis films growing up because I grew up in the early 90s. And I was always intrigued by sort of the juxtaposition of, technical knowledge and creative ability. And I liked that you could use both, because I have very middle left right brain, and it was a great way for me to sort of express myself and tell stories was through filmmaking. But I actually learned more about editing in college, and just from shooting my friends in high school, just running around with a camera and going home and putting it all on Sony Vegas or something that I had on my computer, and putting it together, and sometimes using two VCRs to edit, record, stop and record. I always found it the most fascinating part of storytelling, because you really could just change anything you wanted to in the last minute, using whatever footage you shot. It didn't necessarily have to be exactly how you shot it. You could change it in the edit. And so I always found that fascinating.
Mm-hmm. So you were shooting ideas that your friends had, or were there your short films?
There were, I think I had an English class, and the teacher had us read King Arthur, the story of King Arthur. And then she made us go. She's like, go make a movie about King Arthur. And we were like,
really?
What? Yeah, but we had to write it. And so I wrote a script about King Arthur and made it sort of modern, and went with my group of classmates to the beach, and we shot it. And I noticed I was not a filmmaker. I was editing it in camera. So I would turn to one person and go, okay, you say the line, and now you say the line. I was cutting it while shooting it. So it was crazy. But and then it was fun, because then I would go back home and I would use you could just edit straight on the camera and then into the VCR. So I did. I wrote a little bit of crappy dialogue for my friends to say. And I won an award, Best Director.
Wow.
In my English class, I won Best Director and Best Film. But I think it's because I went above and beyond, and we went to the beach, and it was cool. We had it was cinematic. It's the 10th grade or something.
First of all, a great teacher.
Great teacher. She was great. She was great.
Yeah, and second, you said that you were editing in camera, right? I think that's the way people do it these days. That's the way people learn editing these days as well, with TikTok and YouTube Shorts and things like that. Because basically, when you create them, you also edit in camera, right? So I think at least my thinking always is that editing is like another skill that will become something that most people know how to do, to some extent at least. Like, you know, like writing, like a few hundred years ago, like barely, there were like very few people who knew how to write, right? And these days, like everyone does. 20 years ago, very few people knew how to edit pictures, right? With Photoshop or things like that. These days, like everyone now knows how to do like basic photo editing. And I think it's only a matter of time, like with things like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, like things like this, that like people will know the basics of editing to some extent.
Yeah, but I think it's more like, will they know that they know, because I think that some people still think, like, confuse visual effects with editing. And there's
That's true.
different things. So like where there's like people have picked up on what a match cut is because of TikTok, and because they're like, oh, you could do this, and then but you'll see like a lot of comments about something that had clear like graphics and VFX in it, and they're like, yo, the editing, and it's like I was like, the editing was part of that, but the thing you're commenting on is actually the visual effects, which were great, But, so I think that that clarity will come from like, because I still have family members that just think I'm a producer, like it's just like she produces TV shows, and I'm like, I edit TV shows, like that type of thing. So I think that the clarity will come from really understanding what the craft is, and but everyone will know sort of how to do it, I think. Yeah,
that there is this like Dunning-Kruger effect, which shows you how your level of confidence with the level of competence, right? So basically, once you have like very little competence, your level of confidence is very high, right? And only once you get like once you become more competent, your confidence level like dramatically drops because then you realize that there is so much things you have to learn that you are just not aware.
Right. The ignorance was helpful. And then the ignorance was helpful. And then it became, oh no, this is too much. Yeah.
Okay, Daysha, I want to ask you about becoming, because like we'll talk a little bit about your upcoming film, right? I Want to Dance with Somebody, right? But you are basically a television editor. So I want to ask you about that transition, because I guess it was a transition for you, right? So first of all, like, how did it feel? What was different? And secondly, how did you make that transition?
I honestly don't know how I made the transition. I met with Casey Lemons, who's the director of I'm Gonna Dance with Somebody. And I was a big fan of hers because I was a huge, like, Eve's Bayou was a film that I saw in college. And that movie is the reason why I have like a friend of mine who's like my best friend to this day. It's because we met in college and we bonded over that film, like how crazy it was. And it was great. So it was kind of surreal to even meet Casey and to be talking about possibly working together. I was like, what is this? I worked in television for a long time. I still love working in television. I will likely go back to working in television. I don't want to stop working in television because now I make films or something like that. I want to do both. I'm very it's hard for me to pick one thing to do. But I usually do comedies, and I Want to Dance with Somebody is not a comedy. It's very much not a comedy. So yeah, it was about telling a story, and it was, no matter what the genre, I feel like the storytelling is what you're there to do. And as an editor, I'm there to try to tell the best version of the story possible, and make things clear and emotional and, tragic, and add levity when it's necessary, when I feel like it's good. And I didn't necessarily like seek it out. I met with Casey. I interviewed for the job. I was getting dressed for the Emmys because myself and Jessica Hernandez and Stephanie Philo were nominated for an Emmy that night. So I was getting dressed and my friends were helping me, and I got a text message from my agent and it was like, you got the Whitney thing. And I was like, what? What? I was like, I got but I couldn't think about it because I I wanted the job. After talking to Casey, I wanted the job. At first, I wasn't necessarily sure what this movie was going to be. And I was kind of like, does there need to be another Whitney movie? And then I thought about it and I was like, you know what? There hasn't been a Whitney movie like this, like on this scale. There hasn't been this like deep dive into Whitney. And so getting the text, I was like, oh, I can't think about this right now. And I like threw my phone on the bed because I had to go to the Emmys. And I was like, what if I win? What if I lose? Like that's where my head was. And then we won, which was amazing. And then I went back to the room and texted my agent and said, that's great. I would love to do that. But
what a day.
What an insane day. Like I won an Emmy for the first time and locked a gig with Casey Lemons about Whitney Houston. It was just very surreal. Yeah.
Wow. On top of the world.
Yeah, but also just like you said, just completely nerve-wracked about the whole thing, because now it became, oh, now I have to do a movie about Whitney Houston. Like now it's like, oh, like I have
that's
to like
a huge responsibility.
So much pressure. So much pressure.
Yeah, like many people will see it, that's for sure.
I hope so. I hope people go into it with an open mind, because I know that there's a lot of talk about, Naomi doesn't look exactly like Whitney Houston. And so that might take some people out of it. But I think, we've shown it to so many test audiences and they absolutely fall in love with Naomi because she completely just embodied Whitney. She's not mimicking her. She just kind of becomes her. And I think about like my favorite biopics, like Angela Bassett didn't look like Tina Turner, but she became Tina Turner, and it's what made her performance so passionate and powerful. So I just hope people go with, an open mind, because it's a really great performance.
I don't think it's like you have to have like a very, very similar person, like at least like physically, to play the role. I think the more important aspect is like to make the person relatable, the character relatable to the audience. At least I don't know. That has always been my impression. Like, the example I have is like Elvis. I've seen Elvis like 2 weeks ago, and the actor actually does look like Elvis, like quite a lot. But I don't know. For me, at least, like emotionally, I didn't connect with Elvis that much in that film. So, for example, for me, that was a much bigger problem than I would have if like Elvis wouldn't look like Elvis at all. Like,
sure,
a problem for me.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately that's the goal. Like, it's like I didn't know Whitney Houston. You didn't know Whitney Houston. She was an icon and someone who had fans all over the world who might feel like they knew Whitney Houston, even though they've never met her, So it's like there's that pressure of like making them feel like they're watching someone that they think they know, but everyone has a different interpretation of what that is. So you can't make everyone happy in that respect. So all we could do as filmmakers is, take Whitney the icon and make her Whitney the human being, someone that you can connect to, someone that you can relate to, and sort of try to understand her a little bit more as a person, as a mother, as a daughter, as a wife, as a best friend, as someone with flaws and who, died tragically, but also lived beautifully. So it's like that the goal is to just try to make sure, tell her story and put some respect on her name, to be honest, because she deserves it.
Yeah. The most valuable asset, I guess, she had was her voice, right? So you're using like, the songs she's kind of like playbacked, right? So you have like the original songs in the movie, right? Is it right? Because that was my impression when watching the trailer, right? Because you can't have like it, like the actor performing the songs. It wouldn't make sense. You couldn't like fake it, right? So like, what was the workflow when it comes to that? Like when it comes to all of the performances, the music performances in the film. I don't know. Was it basically like played back for the actors on the set? Did you have to like work work on that, like, I don't know, like a temp song or something like that when editing? How did it look like?
There was a plan way ahead of time, a year before. I think John Warhurst, who is our sound supervisor, but also music editor. I don't know. I told him he has like 7 different jobs on the film, but it's because he had already planned to have the music mixed a certain way, and for Naomi, because Naomi Aki can sing in Whitney's register, so that was very, very helpful. She can't do the Whitney high notes, right? Because no one can.
Okay. Yeah.
but Naomi can sing in her register. So there's a good blend of both voices in the film. And when we've shown the film to people, they're like, is she singing or is it Whitney? Like, you can't tell.
Wow.
And it's really
Seriously?
impressive. Yeah. So by the time I came on to edit it, there was already a plan of like how they were going to do the musical performances and blend the voices, because you really can't tell if it's Naomi or you can't tell if it's Whitney, but you will hear Whitney singing in the film and belting those notes, because no one can do it like Whitney. So there was playback on set, and I got all of that I got all those tracks in the Avid before I even started. They were already prepared and ready for me. So I was able to cut using the same tracks that were played back on set. And it was good because Naomi was singing live. And so that's why you see like the veins popping out of her neck. Like she's really going for it. So, but that's important. It's important because you need to feel like she's singing. Yeah. And it's because she was singing. She'd probably kill me if I ever released the tapes, but she was singing. And she was great.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess with a story like this, it's also a huge, like that the duration of the movie is also like something that you have to discuss in the editing room, right? I'm just wondering, like, how long the editor's cut was, the first editor's cut, and like, what did you have to cut out?
So much. The script was very long. It was a lot of pages, and not all of the lyrics were written in the script, but it would just be like musical performance. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, I have to tack on like 3 minutes to this right here. The editor's cut was around 4 hours, 30 something minutes, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think right now, without credits, the film is 2 hours and 16 minutes. There were some things that we knew we could cut immediately. While we were working on the director's cut, there were some sort of like E and F stories that we were like, okay, we can't tell that story. We have to. Once we decided to focus it and make sure we were following Whitney throughout the entire film, then things started to sort of fall away. And goes, okay, we don't need this. We don't need this. If it's not following her, if it's not getting us in her head, we can drop this scene off. We can drop that scene off. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a different film from what we started with, but that's just, part of the process. Is getting it down and focusing the story as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, when you have such a huge story, life's story, basically, it's the question of story economy, I guess, right? Where you have to like judge every scene and every moment through that perspective, through that like perspective of the story coherency, if it makes sense, to make it relatable to the audience and things like that. Do you recall any like editing choices that you had to make to like to maybe switch things around a little bit to make basically the story as quickly in the movie as possible to make her character like relatable, likable?
There's quite a few things, actually, because the way I kind of looked at the film was And I think Matt Jackson says this all the time, but she was like a fighter in a ring. And I'm like, well, every fighter needs a training montage. She needs, because the training montage sort of like makes the audience feel like they worked for it, like they had to, overcome some things and train really hard to get there. So the problem with Whitney is she was born with this talent and she was definitely trained by her mother how to use it and how to control her voice and things like that. But by the time she meets Clive Davis, she's a star, so it's like, how do you make that? She didn't have a rags to riches story. She didn't have like an underdog story that most people gravitate to and like they latch onto and they're like, yeah, I can relate to that. She didn't have that kind of story. So there were, I had to create a sort of training montage in which you see her picking songs with Clive and going, okay, I don't want to do this, I want to do that. And just, really digging into making her first album so that you can see sort of the genius at work and see like how she picked songs and what she thought of them. And they're all big hits. So it's like great little moments where you'll drop in a track and the audience will be like, oh, I remember that song. And then I take it away. And we're moving on to the next song, moving on to the next one. And, oh, do I want to use it? She's like, no, I don't want to do that one. Okay, I like this. I want to. So you kind of see her, the way she thinks and the way she works. And then, so, in seeing that, when the album is a success, then you feel a little happier for her. You feel like, okay, like you did that. She maybe is compromising a little bit of herself because she's doing this pop music that she doesn't even really, she's a girl from New Jersey. But if you see her going through the process, then that helps with the success. It helps when you see her happy and joyous, and it's like, okay, because she put all of this in and she sacrificed a lot to do it. So there were scenes that
rules for her.
Yeah, and there were scenes that weren't scripted that I just created with the footage. It was like, okay, I need to know what she's thinking in this moment, and we don't have the footage. So there's a whole scene towards the end that I just built with footage that I just had of Naomi just looking in a certain direction. And then so you start to hear the things that are going through her head, and that allows you to sort of connect with her a little bit more. That and just staying on her face and not cutting away from her and just letting her play out the moments and letting the audience see her face change as she hears things, and those type of things help the audience sort of connect with what she might be feeling and going through.
Mm-hmm. When did you suggest those like additional scenes?
That's a great question. Well, one of them, the training montage, I sort of suggested in the director's cut, like early on before the producers had seen it, and I got shot down. And then later in the process, we're trying to figure out what's stopping the pace of the beginning of the movie. I'm like, we're not moving forward. We need to move forward. And I was like, what about that training montage? I keep calling it a training montage. It's not a training montage, but it's. I was like, I need to see her create this album before her song is on the radio, before it becomes this big, And so then I tried it, and then I won it, that type of thing. And then the other scene was kind of born of necessity because we were getting close to locking the film, and there's still that little piece of motivation missing. It was like we have these great scenes, but we need to be able to connect them better. We need to understand why she's going from scene A to scene C. We need scene B that really like gets you there. And I didn't pitch it. I was up at 3 a.m, I think. And I was just like, I'm going to try it. And so I just went on my computer, and, we were working in Santa Monica, and we kind of had a crisis of the ending. It was like, what do we do about the ending? And I was like, okay. So I just went and tried it and cut it together and grabbed some like stock footage and did some temp VFX to like make the scene feel like an actual scene, because it really just was footage that I had. And I showed it to Casey the next day, and she was very emotional and moved, because she was like, you solved it. Like that's what we were missing. We were just missing that, piece. And then it became, okay, great, Casey likes it. Now everyone else has to like it. so then it was like, everyone else has to watch it and sign off on it and do all these things. But it's very delicate how you have to approach it. And I think you have to know your director. You have to have a good relationship with them and know when is the right time to sort of suggest things. And I think me and Casey ended up with a really good rapport and a really good trust in each other. We didn't always agree on everything. We bickered like sisters sometimes, but it was good because it was like that's how the creativity sort of came out. It was like, oh, you know what? It's not this, it's this. This is what we're trying to get out. So yeah.
I think it's healthy not to be like, always on the same page between the director and the editor. Like if there is trust built between the two parties, right? If you trust each other and you know that both of you just want to make the story best, then having that like argument, so to speak, where like both parties know, both sides know that it's not about like not liking someone. Yeah? Like if you still like yourself, you respect each other and things like that, but you just care about the story so much that you have to like have that argument about something. I think it's always just the best. Actually, I think that's
and there's that extra layer of Whitney Houston. No, like that's the other thing. I think on any TV show or any film you work on, you have those arguments with each other because you care about the story and you're passionate about it. You just want to make the best version of this possible, because once we're done, this film just lives forever, right? And so I'm like, I don't want to make a mistake. She doesn't want to make a mistake. And then the added pressure to that is the film is about Whitney Houston. I was like, so all the other decisions we make are about that too. It's like, well, I can't do that. We can't change that to be about that because maybe that wasn't Whitney. Or I would look up an interview, like I researched a lot and watched every interview I could get my hands on. And in my head, I'm like, she wouldn't do that, because I remember her saying, X, Y, Z. It's like, there's an interview where Whitney said she thought she was going to be a veterinarian. She wanted to do something else, and then she ended up doing this. And so it's like, we can't pretend she wanted to do something else when she was a child. We can't, change those things. If it was not about a real person who had such a huge following, it might have been easier to change the story and to change it, but you can't do that. So it's an extra piece of drama added to it.
And responsibility. Yeah, I get it. That's a good point. You were mentioning that, like, the relationship with the director. So how is that different when compared to working on TV shows?
Oh, very different. The amount of time you spend with the director on a television show is very short. They get like 4 days max. I think some shows might be a little longer. Some might be a little shorter. Me and Casey spent 3.5 months in Boston together in the cold. And so it's a kind of bond you create when you're just suffering. I'm from California, and I was in Boston in the winter for 3 months, and I was miserable. And I was making a film with someone I admire very much. So it's very different because the pace is slower. You have so much more time to spend working on the script working on the cut with the director. So it's very different. We can try everything.
So do you have a preference?
No, it's hard to say that I have a preference because I like them both for different reasons. I don't think I could do
okay. 2
films back to back. I would need a break in between. For sure. A big break. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I've heard that. Like, for example, Simon Smith, the editor of Chernobyl,
I like Simon.
You know him, great. So he told me that he likes in between films, he liked to work on his own stuff. So, for example, like a few months ago, I think I think it's not released yet even, but he has finished his short film.
I would love to do that. I don't know how he does that. I
don't know either.
I don't know how he does that. I have to like turn my brain off for a while and just like spend time with family, go lay on a beach and be quiet somewhere. And then I also have a problem with not working. Like I'm always working. This is the first hiatus, like real hiatus I've had in years. And that's so, but I don't know how he does that. Films take a lot out of you. They take a lot out of you.
Yeah. I admire that about him as well. About that, like I think I've seen an interview with you where you talked about how important work ethics is to you. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect? So what falls under that umbrella of work ethics for you, for an editor, that you think is like crucial to have a good career, so to speak?
Well, I have a lot of assistant editors ask me that as well, because they want to be hired by editors, and for me, work ethic is like the number one thing I look for in them, and it's because I have such strong work ethic, and I need you to kind of match that, when you come work for me. But I grew up with, my mom and my grandmother were just such great role models when it came to like I saw my mom was a single parent, and she had me and my older brother. She, put herself through nursing school, came out and just work. And all of that was out of necessity because she needed to take care of us. She had, and she wanted to, build a life for herself. So I kind of was like, that was kind of imprinted in my head very early on. It's like, if you want to get something done, you have to work your ass off. And I think no matter how talented you are, if you're not willing to really work for things, then nothing will come. So I as an editor, I'm very like, I'm not trying to kill myself in an edit bay. I need sleep. I will get sleep. I will eat healthy. I go to the gym. On the weekends, I will take time to myself. I try to be outside as much as possible. I go hiking or something like that. But when it's time to work, I'm very focused, and it's about the work. And I want everything I do to be a reflection of me in a positive way. So I think when people work with me, they find that it's like I'm very on top of things, work very hard, easy to get along with. I'm not stressed out. Casey said that all the time. She was like, "How are you not as stressed as me?" And I'm like, well, because everything will be fine. Like everything will be fine. It's like, how do you know that? And I'm like, because I'm going to work really hard, and then it's going to be fine. And that was kind of like a way that I sort of, my philosophy on it is like, well, all I can do is the best I can do. And I will work really hard to do that. And in the end, we'll walk away proud because the work ethic was there. So
I already know that she loved working with you because it's the best thing for an editor to be like someone that the director can rely on, and treat like a psychologist to some extent. Right? Who basically, I have a better way to put it, who keeps their moral high, right? Basically.
Yeah, and I'm very strict. Like she's a little more emotional than I am. I'm not very emotional. So like whenever we had a problem come up, I just go to the logical solution first. And I'm very calm, and I don't sit in the problem too long. I go, okay, this is the problem. How do we fix it? So she did like that because me and her were like yin and yang. It's like just the opposites. And so I think she did enjoy that.
That's interesting. I also want to talk a little bit about, first of all, prep work. So what do you do once you knew that you landed the work on, Whitney Houston movie, right? What was your prep work, first of all? And secondly, I want to talk about like technical aspects of putting the scene together, the initial cut, the rough cut. How do you go about like select reels and putting that first rough cut? But let's maybe start with the prep work question.
Once I realized once I found out that I got the film, I read the script again. And I knew they were actually still working on the script, but they were going to start shooting in a month. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to prep. But I just go through the script thoroughly, and I try to visualize in my head, okay, what is this going to look like? What do I need from it? And if there's a way I can let Casey know what I think editorially will need from it, I should do that now. So I start, marking up the script. My scripts always have tabs all over them and notes everywhere. And anything I was confused about, as far as motivation or where the character might be, I would ask Casey about it. That's kind of the extent to the prep. Because this was a movie about Whitney Houston, like I said, I watched a lot of interviews because I knew Whitney Houston. I grew up listening to her, loved her to death. She outsang everybody all the time. I thought I was so impressed by Whitney Houston. But Whitney Houston, the person, I didn't necessarily know that well. So just sort of watched interviews from the 80s in order, from the 80s all the way up to the 2000s. And just tried to get to know her as much as possible. And then you just start speaking to department heads and, going, what are we looking for? There's a lot of VFX in the film. So there was a lot I had to wrap my hand around and go, okay, this scene is going to look like this one day. But right now it's probably going to be this. So a lot of discussions about how that was going to be shot and what the plan was for things like that.
Mm-hmm. On that script stage, you said you were taking notes and things like that. Did you have like suggestions about like coverage that she needs to take or something like that?
Yeah, there was a couple of scenes, or even when we first got dailies back, there was a couple of scenes where I was just like, okay, well, in the script, it's sort of matter of fact, sort of written matter of fact, but I can't gauge what the emotional response from Whitney is in the scene. So I would just suggest a close up here and there. I'm like, can we get something close, get something single, not dirty, not over, but just something on her. So that I can play with it. But the other things like the musical performances were well planned out. And Barry, the DP, was running 3 cameras all the time. So the coverage was there. we had the coverage. But then that also meant, sometimes the cameraman was in someone else's shot and there was a lot of things like that. So once we started getting dailies in, I had more questions and suggestions and just being like, hey, I'm noticing this. Is there a way to make this a little bit, better tomorrow or next week when you shoot this scene? Yeah, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm asking like kind of for a selfish reason because like the director that I edited a short film for, he told me that next time he wants to bring me on earlier in the process, like before he actually starts shooting the film, right? And I know that he expects me to next time to do this like kind of like almost like workout shortlist together, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm kind of like asking how did you go about it?
I came on a little too late for that, but I think it's smart. I think it's that obviously the director is going to do whatever they want to do. It's their vision. There are times in the edit there was times in the cut room where I would try something and in my head I would go, but that's not really her style. That's not Casey's style. And then I would, I'd show it to her and I'd go, but I know that's not what you normally do. So there's that, so I think that like you're never going to have that prep time with the director in which you're like, oh, you should get this shot and then it should do this and then it should do that. I think what you normally do is just go, here's what I think I need for this scene, and then they'll shoot it how they want to shoot it.
True.
Or they'll have an idea about something and you'll be like, that, that might not cut with this. So if you're going to do it, like there was a lot of times in the VFX for this movie where I would ask the VFX people, can you slow the camera down at the end so that it can come to a complete stop? Otherwise, it's not going to cut when I go to the next shot, that type of thing. So like that type of prep is what you might end up doing.
Well, that's interesting as well. I have never worked with like a VFX team yet. So
it's fun. We had a great VFX team. I like them a lot. They were really cool. They were all in London, but they were great.
So you've mentioned that it was like a multicam shoot, right? So that makes this question about like the process of assembling a scene even more interesting to me. How were you watching dailies if it was like a multicam? Did you watch it as a multicam sequence as well? Or did you watch like every camera separately? And then like how did you work out your select reels?
I watched everything as a multicam, and I had 3 monitors up, so I would have like one monitor playing something and another one playing something else. But in Avid,
oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, but in Avid, I would just watch the grouping. We did super groups for the performances. An editor friend of mine, Peggy, who worked on a musical for Ryan Murphy called Prom, she actually gave me that idea. She was like, you should super group every performance so you can see every take all at once, which was great when it came to editing the performance, because you could just switch camera banks and go, okay, this is what we did, this is what we did, this is what we did, and not have to sit and go back through everything.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, It was really great. It saved so much time. But yeah, I watch everything. I'm used to watching every bit of dailies. So I worked on things like a Black Lady sketch show where there was a lot of improv and things like that. So I'm just used to making sure I watch absolutely everything. And I like it. So I watch everything down once every take, and then I'll go back through it and watch it again and start grabbing things that I really like, moments that I really like, line reads that I really like, and I'll throw those in a bin. And then of course there's a script supervisor who told me what the director really likes. So then, I'll make sure I have her selects they live somewhere, and I'll usually go with those first, because that's, Casey's already decided that she likes that reading and think that performance, or, for whatever reason. And then, I start building the scene. I usually start with the end of the scene first, and I'll start to build the end of a scene and, go, okay, here's the point of this scene. It's like, what is this scene about? And then I'll build that moment first, and then I'll work backwards to get to that moment. Because that's like the most important moment of the scene, is like what we're going to leave the scene with when we go to the next scene. So I want to make sure I get that right, and then I'll work backwards. And I also did a lot of, it was scary because this is my first feature film, and I was working with Casey Lemons, and the day I showed her my editor's cut, I was like sweating because we watched it in a theater. I had added all kinds of temp music. Temp score. I put in a Luther Vandross song. I was like, because in my head, I was like, it's a movie about Whitney Houston, so the only other people that should be in it are like legends. Like, you shouldn't use any other music. If it's not a legend, they can't be in the movie. So I had like Luther Vandross in there, and for this very particular moment, and it was a risk. I took a swing, and I was like, she's either going to watch this 4-hour cut and fire me, or she's going to watch it and be impressed. There was a point where the Luther Vandross song started to play in the movie, and she looked over at me, and I looked at her, and she was like, I'm smiling. And I was like, thank God I'm not fired. But yeah, so there's, I definitely, I grabbed score from John Williams and Thompson Newman, and I was like really just trying to set the tone for the film. So the editor's cut felt like this big, sweeping, completed film. And in the end, she was like, I'm impressed. She was crying, and she was like, I'm impressed. And I was like,
wow.
Live to fight another day. Yeah. But it was terrifying. It was terrifying. I was like, you could have just, talking to myself, I was like, you could have just put the movie together and not did all the extra stuff. Like, but that wouldn't have been me. I'm a little extra.
That's perfect. I love the story. I think like the first cut is always terrifying.
Terrifying.
For an editor at least, because you always have that like clash of expectations with reality, and it's always nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I was just like, oh. She was like, how long is the movie? I was like, it's pretty long. And I was like, it's like 4 hours and something. She's like, oh, okay. I thought it would be 5. And I was like, okay, great. At least the expectation was.
Yeah.
Well, she's made 6 films. She knew exactly when she read the script. She was like, this is long.
She has enough experience to know. That's the process. Yeah. And to trust in the process as well, right?
Trusting the process.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And Daysha, I just want to ask you, like, what's next for you? Like, you said you're on a hiatus right now, right? So, what are you like? What are your plans? What are the maybe stories that you want to edit or filmmakers that you want to work with?
Oh, there's so many filmmakers that I want to work with. Right now, I am taking a break. I think I'm just going to hang out for a minute, like for the holidays, because it's December, and I was like, not really point in me trying to start something right now. I might as well just enjoy the holidays.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm just gonna calm down for a little bit. But there's a couple of things I'm looking at possibly starting early next year. But there's so many like really cool filmmakers that I would love to work with. I love Hero, who directed like 90% of Atlanta on FX. I think that whole team, Atlanta is like one of the best shows I've ever seen. And I think it's, even the team that did The Bear, I think I love stuff like that. And I would love to do like my own Mayor of Easttown, which is like this, just some crazy suspenseful miniseries. Would love to do something like that. But I really love sci-fi. And so I've always been trying to get into that, to cut something really cool. I love cutting action. Would love to get to do that soon. So very open to what's next, but we'll be taking a break.
Do you plan to write your stuff in the future as well? Your own stuff?
Yes.
I mean, I'm asking the question because I think like to me, I'm an awful writer. I am, but my impression is always that it's important skill for an editor to try to get better at. So I'm doing the best I can to get better at it. So yeah, so just asking because of that reason. Like, do you write?
I do. I used to write much more, and I stopped because I just started working. But I think you feel like there's a story that you need to tell. I think that like I can tell that that's in me. I just need to access it somehow and go have time to write it and not fill up all my time with work. So it's just about time. That's why I was like, I can't believe Simon just is like, I feel like there's some people that can do that, like just churn things out, and it's like they can turn it on and it's like, oh yeah, and then I'll write something and I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I'll read it 3 months later and I'm like, that is trash. What is wrong with you? That is so bad. So like, I need some sort of checks and balances for my writing. One day.
Yeah. One day, I say to myself the same things. So I understand.
We'll all do it one day, and then it'll be terrifying. It's like I'm already terrified about this movie coming out. Imagine putting like your own personal story out.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why, especially for writers, directors, like I have like a huge respect, enormous respect, because it's not only that they have like the most difficult like jobs, but also like they put themselves out there.
Yeah, I was talking to a writer who he wrote some of that last Batman film that just came out, He was like one of the writers on that. And the next thing he was doing, he was directing it. And it's like it was a sci-fi movie. And, but the analogy there was clearly something personal. And he wrote it, and he was like, his team was like, it's so personal that only you can direct it. And so he directed it, and I was like, God, and I told him at the end of like this conversation we had, I was like, thank you for letting me read the script, because it felt very personal. It's just, I couldn't imagine, using like the sort of allegories but underneath it all, it's a very personal story about his life, and people are just going to go watch it on Netflix. Like, I don't know. I was just like, I can't, in my head, I can't like wrap myself around it, because I'm a very private person too. So I think that's probably part of the reason why I don't really do it. It's scary.
Okay, Daysha, is there anything that you want to add to the conversation, or maybe like the message to the editing community?
Editing community is probably the best community in this business, and they are clever and smart, and they don't need me to tell them anything.
I think part of it is because like by design, we are like lonely people to some extent. So when we get a chance to talk to other editors, we like doing it.
And it's about something we really like. Editing is like a passion. So it's like
exactly.
to sit and get to talk about it. It's really fun. Yeah. This has been great. Thank you.
You don't do it unless you're obsessed about it. Yeah. To some extent,
you have to be completely obsessed. There, like I said, I was sitting at 3 a.m. trying to figure out how to fix the end of the movie. So like, and you don't do that unless you are absolutely obsessed.
The thing with Daysha that really stood out to me from the interview was kind of stuff that we've talked about before with other editors and directors, that relationship about how a director is very emotional and an editor has to be logical, kind of like focusing on the story. Daysha's example of that kind of to a T, being like the director she worked with was very emotional, and she had to be the logical person to be like, this is what needs to be done. This is the problem. Let's take care of it, rather than ruminating on it to like just spin out of control, which I thought was, I think that was kind of the first time that we heard an editor actually say that, to show that very distinct line of the roles.
And it's not to say that like, you can't be emotional as an editor, or you can't be logical as a director, but as an editor, you have to be like, solution oriented. I think that's the main takeaway that she was like trying to convey.
Oh,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
And of course, that was wonderful. I also loved the approach that she had to doing the training montage in the film. I thought like it was so insightful, because it makes so much sense. I haven't seen the film yet it makes so much sense to place a training montage in a film like this. To have this like struggle period for someone, at least like even if it wasn't there, to just to craft something that will have this emotional response from the audience, right?
Yeah.
So I love this. I loved the idea of like Rocky style. I don't know if it's Rocky style, but still like training montage. That's a great one.
There's something to be said about that emotional hook to show the progression of that character from one thing to another thing. And it may be a trope of some sort, but at the same time, it works really well, and people follow along the story much better in that way. And it's what the audience wants, really. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was that Daysha had said that when she works a scene, she starts from the end and works her way backwards, which kind of blows my mind, because I'm so used to like doing stuff chronologically. Like, okay, we're going to start here, and then we're going to work out the problem until we get to the solution. 2 + 2 = 4, rather than, okay, what's 4? And then what do we need to separate to make that answer? So I thought that was really interesting. And also, I think a first editor who has talked about editing scenes in that way.
Yeah. Actually, funny thing is that like a few days ago, I published my interview with Walter March on Cut to the Point YouTube channel. And he does give an example of another editor who does it the same way, like starting backwards, editing a scene backwards. So that was kind of funny that very close to each other. They both said to me the same thing.
Yeah, that's funny. It's kind of proves the point of there's really no wrong way in regards to how you do things.
Definitely.
Anyway, we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, we want to hear from you. We're going to start working on the second season of Cut to Reveal, which is going to be probably very different from the first season. We cannot tell you what secrets we will unveil when it comes out, but it's going to be a little bit different.
If you have ideas.
Yeah, but if there's things that you want to hear,
we're open to them.
Exactly. So in the description, there's links for the speak pipe so that you can leave us a voicemail of sorts. You can follow us on Instagram at Cut to Reveal, as well as we have an email address so you can email us directly. Please don't hesitate to reach out about anything to improve the show or how we can improve as podcast hosts, or even the subject matter or ideas. We would love to hear from you.
And with that, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year and Happy Holidays. So take care, everybody.